Caleb Rowan stood at the edge of the private bank lobby, rainwater still clinging to the shoulders of his jacket. He hadn't meant to come inside looking like this. Tired, rushed, unfinished. But the thought wouldn't let him wait another day. Numbers had a way of haunting him. They followed him through long work shifts, through grocery aisles where he added items and quietly put them back, through nights when his daughter slept and he stared at the ceiling counting what he didn't have. Caleb was 38, a single father, and painfully aware of how thin everything had become. Money, time, hope. He worked maintenance for a commercial building downtown, a job that kept his hands busy and his mind exhausted. That morning, before dropping his daughter, Mia, at school, she'd asked an innocent question. "Daddy, are we okay this month?" He had smiled and said yes. Now he was here because lies weighed more than truth. The bank was quiet in the way expensive places always were. Marble floors, soft lighting, conversations that sounded rehearsed. Caleb adjusted the strap of his worn backpack and stepped forward, feeling out of place among polished shoes and tailored coats. He reminded himself that this was still just a building, still just a screen with numbers. Nothing more. The teller looked up with a practiced smile. Her name tag read Elena Park. She seemed kind, alert, already reading the tension in his posture. Caleb slid his card across the counter and lowered his voice. "I just want to see my balance," he said. He didn't add please. He didn't explain. He had learned not to. Behind him, a soft laugh cut through the quiet. It wasn't friendly. It was amused in a way that carried judgment. Caleb felt it without turning around. He kept his eyes on the counter as Elena typed. The laughter grew bolder. "Oh, that's adorable," a woman's voice said, smooth and sharp. Some people still get surprised by numbers. Caleb swallowed. He knew better than to respond. Pride didn't pay bills. Pride didn't keep lights on. He focused on his breathing instead. Elena paused, frowned slightly, then continued typing. The system took longer than usual. The loading symbol spun once, twice. Caleb felt his chest tighten. He expected disappointment. He had come prepared for it. He had told himself this was only confirmation, not catastrophe. The woman behind him stepped closer. He could feel her presence now, confident, unhurried. When he finally glanced sideways, he saw her reflection in the glass. Perfect posture, designer coat, diamond bracelet catching the light. Her name floated through the room in a whisper. Isadora Vance. Billionaire. Investor. Someone who lived in a different version of the same city. Isadora smiled openly now. "You really came all the way in here just to check?" she asked, not bothering to hide her amusement. "That's brave." Caleb looked back to the counter. "I'm done," he said quietly, though nothing was finished yet. Elena's fingers froze above the keyboard. Caleb noticed that. She leaned closer to the screen, her expression shifting from routine focus to confusion. She refreshed the page once, then again. Her lips parted slightly. The air in the lobby changed. Isadora's smile faltered. "Is there a problem?" she asked, irritation creeping in. Elena didn't answer right away. She looked at Caleb, then back at the screen, as if making sure she was reading it correctly. Caleb felt a strange pull in his chest, a pressure that didn't feel like fear. Felt like recognition without memory. He thought of his mother, long gone, who used to tell him that some doors stayed closed until you stopped knocking. He had never understood what she meant. He hadn't expected a door to appear at all. "I'm sorry," Elena said softly, her voice careful now. "The system is pulling up additional information." Caleb's heart began to race. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "No," she replied, then hesitated. "I don't think so." Isadora crossed her arms. "Well, we don't have all day." Elena swallowed and turned the monitor slightly so only Caleb could see. At first, the numbers didn't make sense. His mind rejected them the way it rejected impossible math. He leaned closer, blinking, sure there had been a mistake. The balance didn't just have more digits than he expected. It had more digits than he could process. Caleb's breath caught. "That can't be mine," he whispered. Elena shook her head slowly. The account is in your name, she said. It's been dormant for years. Isadora's heel clicked sharply against the floor as she stepped forward. What is going on? She snapped. Elena straightened, her professionalism finally cracking. Ms. Vance, she said carefully, I think you should give us a moment. Isadora laughed once, harsh and disbelieving. Give him a moment? Over what? Elena didn't respond. She printed a single page and slid it toward Caleb instead. His hands shook as he picked it up. There was a name listed beneath his. Not his daughter's. Not his own. A name he hadn't seen since childhood. A name tied to memories he had been told were nothing. Stories dismissed as misunderstandings. A trust. An inheritance. Established 22 years ago. Caleb's knees felt weak. He remembered arguments whispered behind closed doors. A father who disappeared. A lawyer who came once and never returned. He had been told it was over, that there was nothing left. He had believed them. Behind him, Isadora's laughter had died completely. Silence stretched tight and uncomfortable. Caleb folded the paper slowly, carefully, as if it might shatter. He didn't smile. He didn't look triumphant. He felt hollow in a way that made room for everything at once. Elena spoke gently. Mr. Rowan, would you like to sit down? Caleb nodded, though he hadn't asked for this. He hadn't come for answers. He had come for confirmation of survival. Instead, the screen had given him a past he didn't know he was allowed to reclaim. Isadora stared at him now, her confidence replaced with calculation. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Caleb rose from the chair, straightening his jacket. He thought of Mia waiting at school, of her question that morning. Yes, he said quietly, to no one in particular. We're okay. Caleb sat in the small consultation room just off the main lobby, his hands folded tightly in his lap. The room smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. A neutral space meant for calm conversations, not for realities being rewritten. The printed page lay on the table in front of him, untouched. He hadn't looked at it again. He didn't trust his eyes yet. Through the glass wall, he could still see the lobby. Isadora Vance stood near the counter, speaking sharply into her phone. Her voice low but tense. The ease she had carried moments earlier was gone. Power looked different when it was surprised. Elena returned with a middle-aged man in a dark suit. His movements were measured, his expression composed in the way only people trained to deliver difficult truths ever mastered. Mr. Rowan, he said, extending a hand. I'm Victor Hale, Senior Account Manager. Caleb shook his hand automatically. There's been a mistake, he said. Came out more like a hope than a statement. Victor sat down slowly. I understand why you'd think that, but there hasn't been. He slid a folder across the table. Caleb didn't open it. This account, Victor continued, was established on your behalf when you were 16, as a protected trust. The funds were restricted until certain conditions were met. Caleb finally looked up. What conditions? Victor hesitated. Time. And confirmation. Confirmation of what? That you were alive, Victor said gently, and that no one else had claimed control under fraudulent authority. The words hit harder than the numbers had. You mean someone tried, Caleb said. Yes. Caleb leaned back, the chair creaking softly. Memories surfaced without permission now. His uncle's sudden interest after his father's disappearance. Documents he hadn't understood. Adults telling him to sign things because it was easier that way. I was told there was nothing, Caleb said quietly. They said my father left debts. That there was no estate. Victor nodded once. That's a common narrative in these situations. Caleb closed his eyes briefly. His father's face came to him in fragments. A voice telling him to remember who he was. To never let anyone convince him he was small. So why now? Caleb asked. Why did it show up today? Victor glanced toward the glass wall. Because you came in person. Because you verified identity. And because the final legal hold expired last week. Caleb let out a slow breath. How much? Victor named a number. Caleb didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, something cracked wide open. That's not just savings, Caleb said. No, Victor agreed. It's generational. From the lobby, Isadora's gaze locked onto the room. She ended her call abruptly and walked toward the door. Victor noticed and stood. I'll give you a moment, he said. There are decisions you'll need to make. But none of them are urgent. Caleb nodded, still stunned. The door opened before Victor fully left. Isadora stepped inside without waiting for permission. So, she said coolly. It's true. Caleb met her gaze. For the first time, he didn't feel smaller. It seems so, he replied. She crossed her arms. You didn't look like someone with that kind of money. Caleb almost smiled. Almost. I didn't know, he said. And I still don't know what it means. Isadora studied him differently now, her eyes sharp with interest rather than disdain. It means people have underestimated you, she said. Including me. People have been doing that my whole life, Caleb replied. She tilted her head. Then you should learn to use it. Caleb stood. I didn't come here to learn how to be like you. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance. Then curiosity. You think money doesn't change things? She asked. I think it reveals them, Caleb said quietly. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Isadora laughed softly, not mocking this time. Interesting. She stepped aside, opening the door. We'll talk again. Caleb watched her leave, feeling no triumph, only distance. Victor returned a few minutes later with paperwork and a calm explanation of next steps. Caleb signed where indicated, his hand steady despite the storm inside him. He scheduled a follow-up meeting, asked practical questions, anchored himself in details because details were safe. When he finally stepped back into the rain-soaked street, the city felt unchanged. Cars passed. People hurried. No one knew his life had just split into before and after. His phone buzzed. A message from Mia's school reminding parents about the science fair next week. Caleb stared at it for a long moment. Then he smiled. He didn't go home right away. He walked instead, letting the rain soak through his jacket, grounding him. Money didn't erase years of fear. It didn't undo missed moments or quiet shame. But it gave him something else. Choice. That night, after dinner, Mia asked the same question again. Daddy, are we okay? Caleb knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. Yes, he said, this time without lying. We really are. As she hugged him, Caleb realized something else. Whatever had been hidden from him wasn't just money. It was a truth someone had worked very hard to bury. And he intended to find out why. Caleb didn't sleep that night. He lay on the couch fully dressed, one arm draped over his eyes, listening to the refrigerator hum and the occasional car pass outside. The apartment felt the same, too small, slightly drafty, familiar in every way, but he didn't. The numbers replayed in his mind not as figures but as questions. Who had set up the trust? Who had tried to take it? And why it had been kept from him for so long? At dawn, he rose quietly and brewed coffee he barely tasted. He packed Mia's lunch, braided her hair the way he'd learned through trial and error, and walked her to school under a sky just beginning to clear. You seem different, Mia said, squinting up at him. Like when you get good news but don't want to say it yet. Caleb smiled softly. You're observant. She shrugged. Mom said that too. The words landed gently but stayed. After drop-off, Caleb didn't go to work. He called in sick for the first time in years. Then he drove back to the bank. Victor Hale was already waiting. They sat in the same consultation room, sunlight now replacing the sterile glow from the day before. Victor slid another folder across the table. Thicker this time, edges worn. These are the historical records, he said. Transactions, legal correspondence, attempted claims. Caleb opened it slowly. The first name he recognized was his father's. Daniel Rowan. The sight of it made his chest tighten. His father had vanished when Caleb was 15. No goodbye, no explanation. One day he was there, making bad jokes and fixing leaky faucets. The next he was gone. Caleb had been told it was shame, debt, cowardice. The file told a different story. There was a business dispute, Victor explained. Your father was a minority partner in a logistics firm. When he refused to sell his shares under pressure, things escalated. Escalated how? Caleb asked. Victor chose his words carefully. Legal intimidation, asset freezes, and eventually, disappearance. Caleb's fingers curled around the page. You're saying he didn't just leave? No, Victor said quietly. We believe he was forced out. Possibly worse. Caleb closed his eyes. The room seemed to tilt. And my uncle? He asked. Where does he fit into this? Victor turned a page. Your uncle filed multiple claims to gain control of the trust after your father's disappearance. All were denied due to lack of authority. Caleb remembered the sudden visits, the pressure to sign papers, the way adults spoke around him instead of to him. He told me my father ruined everything, Caleb said. That there was nothing left. Victor nodded. That narrative served him. A knock interrupted them. Elena Park stepped inside, her expression hesitant. Mr. Rowan, there's someone here asking for you. Caleb frowned. Who? She hesitated. Ms. Vance. Victor's jaw tightened. You don't have to see her. Caleb considered it, then shook his head. No, I do. Isadora entered moments later, composed once again, but something in her eyes had shifted. Curiosity, sharpened by calculation. I did some research, she said without preamble. Daniel Rowan wasn't nobody. Caleb stood. You don't get to investigate my family. Isadora raised a hand. I wasn't digging for leverage. I was verifying. Why? Caleb asked. Because if someone hid that kind of money, she replied. It's never just about money. Victor cleared his throat. Ms. Vance, this is a private matter. She ignored him. Her gaze stayed on Caleb. There are people who won't like that this surfaced. Caleb felt a chill. Like who? Isadora exhaled. Like the people your father stood up to, and the ones who benefited when he disappeared. The room fell silent. You think they're still watching? Caleb asked. I think they never stopped, she said. Caleb thought of Mia, of the quiet life he'd built, of how fragile it all suddenly felt. I didn't ask for this, he said. No one ever does, Isadora replied. But you have it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You need protection, advisors, people who understand power. Caleb shook his head. I need truth. Isadora studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Then start with the past. She turned to Victor. I want a copy of the dispute filings from the Rowan case. Victor's eyes narrowed. That's not appropriate. Isadora smiled thinly. It is if the same parties are still active investors in my firms. Caleb looked between them. You're connected to this? Indirectly, Isadora admitted. Which is why I laughed yesterday. I thought I knew every name that mattered. Her smile faded. I was wrong. She left without another word. Victor closed the door behind her and turned to Caleb. You should consider security. Caleb nodded slowly. After I pick up my daughter. That afternoon, Caleb stood at the school gate watching Mia run toward him, backpack bouncing, laughter free and unburdened. He lifted her, breathed her in, and made a silent promise. Whatever came next, he would not let history repeat itself. That evening he received an email from Victor. Subject: Additional discovery. Attached was a scanned document dated 18 years ago. A notarized statement. A single line highlighted. In the event of my disappearance, all assets are to be held in trust for my son, Caleb Rowan. Caleb stared at the screen, throat tight. His father hadn't abandoned him. He had protected him. And someone had tried very hard to make sure he never knew. Caleb closed the laptop and looked around the apartment. It was still small, still imperfect, but it was his. And now so was the truth. The first thing Caleb did was change his routine. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't announce it to anyone or make a show of it. He simply stopped taking the same streets, stopped parking in the same spots, stopped letting habit decide his movements. Victor's words echoed in his head. People don't stop watching, they just wait. And once you heard something like that, it never fully left you. Mia noticed, of course. Why are we going the long way? She asked one morning as Caleb drove past their usual turn. Traffic, he said lightly. She studied him the way only children could. You say that when you're thinking. Caleb smiled. Guess I'm thinking a lot lately. At work, he kept his head down. Fixed what needed fixing. Said less than usual. But he felt eyes on him now, even when no one was there. Paranoia, maybe. Or instinct waking up after years of sleep. 2 days later, Victor called. I need you to come in, he said. There's been movement. Caleb's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of movement? A claim, Victor replied. Quiet. Strategic. Filed through a shell entity. Caleb closed his eyes. My uncle. We can't confirm yet, Victor said. But the structure matches previous attempts. Caleb drove to the bank without telling Mia why he'd be late. He hated that part. Hated the secrets already creeping in. But he reminded himself that this wasn't hiding. This was shielding. Victor spread documents across the table, neat and clinical. They're not contesting the trust directly, he explained. They're questioning the legitimacy of the original assets. They're trying to say my father didn't own them, Caleb said. Yes. Caleb exhaled slowly. And if they succeed? They won't, Victor said firmly. But it tells us something important. That they're nervous, Caleb replied. Victor nodded. And that they know you know. A knock came at the door. Elena Park stepped in again, her expression unreadable. Mr. Rowan. There's a visitor asking specifically for you. Caleb didn't ask who this time. He already knew. Isadora Vance walked in a moment later, dressed simply, no diamonds, no performance. She looked almost normal. It unsettled him more than the arrogance had. They've made their move, she said. Victor stiffened. Ms. Vance, this meeting is about to become a lot bigger than a trust dispute, Isadora interrupted. She turned to Caleb. Your father wasn't just a stubborn partner. He was a problem. Caleb crossed his arms. For who? For men who build empires by squeezing people who don't fight back, she replied. And your father fought back. She placed a folder on the table. Thinner than Victor's. Heavier somehow. I pulled favors, Isadora said. Quiet ones. The kind people don't like admitting they owe. Caleb opened the folder. Photos. Old ones. Surveillance stills. A grainy image of his father entering a building Caleb didn't recognize. A date stamped in the corner. 2 weeks before he disappeared. Why are you helping me? Caleb asked, not looking up. Isadora didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was lower. Because I've spent my life on the winning side of things like this. And for once, I don't like who that puts me next to. Victor watched them both, saying nothing. Caleb finally met Isadora's eyes. You laughed at me. She didn't flinch. Yes. And now I'm trying to make that right, she said. Or at least, less wrong. Silence settled. Victor cleared his throat. There's another matter, he said, sliding one more document forward. The trust doesn't just include liquid assets. Caleb frowned. What else is there? Ownership, Victor replied. In several logistics routes. Warehousing. Infrastructure your father helped design. Caleb's pulse quickened. You're saying I don't just have money. You have leverage, Victor said. Isadora's lips pressed together. Which means you're no longer invisible. That night, Caleb didn't go straight home. He parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, scanning shadows, listening to sounds he'd ignored his whole life. When he unlocked the apartment door, relief hit him harder than fear. Mia was on the couch coloring. You're late, she said. I know, Caleb replied, sitting beside her. I'm sorry, she shrugged. It's okay. Miss Turner stayed with me. Caleb nodded, thanking the neighbor silently in his head for the 100th time. He watched Mia draw houses, stick figures, a sun too big for the page. Daddy? She said suddenly. Are we in trouble? The question stopped him cold. Why would you think that? She didn't look up. You're being careful. Like when I broke my arm and you wouldn't let me run. Caleb took a breath. We're not in trouble, he said carefully. But we're being watched. She considered that. Like famous people? He smiled faintly. Not exactly. She leaned against him. As long as you're here. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the weight of the promise settle in his chest. Later that night, after Mia slept, Caleb opened his laptop and reread the notarized statement from his father. He imagined the man writing it, knowing what might come, choosing preparation over panic. Caleb whispered into the quiet room, I see it now. The next morning, Victor called again. They've escalated, he said. Subpoenas. Pressure. They're trying to force you into the open. Caleb stared out the window at the waking city. Then maybe it's time I stopped hiding. Victor hesitated. That path changes things. I know, Caleb replied. But they already changed. He thought of Isadora's words. Leverage. He thought of Mia's question. As long as you're here. Caleb straightened. Resolve settling where fear had lived. Set the meeting, he said. All of them. Mr. Rowan. I'm done being quiet, Caleb finished. They took my father's voice. They don't get mine. As he ended the call, Caleb felt something solid take shape inside him. Not anger, not revenge. Purpose. Whatever his father had built, whatever truth had been buried, Caleb would bring it into the light. Not for power, but so that no one could ever tell his daughter a lie like the one he'd been living. The conference room overlooked the city, glass walls stretching from floor to ceiling like a deliberate reminder of height and power. Caleb arrived early as Victor had advised. Not out of fear, but to take control of the space before anyone else could. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, watching traffic move far below. From up here, everything looked small, manageable. It struck him how often distance changed perception, and how often that illusion was used against people who never got this view. Victor entered quietly, setting a leather folder on the table. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Caleb nodded. Who exactly? Victor exhaled. Your uncle's legal representatives. 2 partners from the firm that handled the original asset freeze. And, he hesitated. A private equity intermediary. Caleb turned slowly. The same network my father fought. Yes. Caleb didn't react. He'd expected this. What surprised him was how calm he felt. The fear that had once lived in his chest had hardened into something steadier. Good, Caleb said. Then we don't have to pretend anymore. The door opened again. Isadora Vance walked in without ceremony, dressed in muted gray, hair pulled back, no jewelry except a simple watch. She didn't look like someone about to dominate a room. She looked like someone who already had. You're early, she said. So are you, Caleb replied. She nodded once. I wanted to see your face before they arrived. And, Caleb asked. And I wanted to be sure, she said carefully, that you understand what you're stepping into. Caleb gestured to the table. You mean this? She studied him. I mean that once you speak today, you won't be able to go back to being ignored. Caleb thought of Mia, of her drawings taped to the fridge, of the life he'd protected by staying small. I'm not doing this to be seen, he said. I'm doing it so my daughter never has to wonder why the truth disappeared. Isadora's expression softened. Not much, but enough. Then you're already ahead of most people in this room. The door opened again. 3 men entered, all confidence and tailored authority. One of them, silver-haired, measured, met Caleb's eyes and paused. Recognition flickered there. Not familiarity. Calculation. Mr. Rowan, the man said. I'm Leonard Ashcroft. We represent several parties concerned about the sudden activation of legacy assets tied to your name. Caleb didn't sit. Concerned how? He asked. Ashcroft smiled thinly. Confusion. Discrepancies. Questions about ownership. Victor stepped in. Ownership has already been verified. Ashcroft waved a hand dismissively. Verified doesn't mean uncontested. Caleb finally sat down. Slowly. Deliberately. My father's shares were frozen under false claims, Caleb said. Claims filed by my uncle. Claims your firm supported. Ashcroft's smile didn't waver. At the time, the evidence suggested my father was inconvenient, Caleb interrupted calmly. So you erased him. The room stilled. Isadora leaned back, observing. Ashcroft's eyes hardened. Be careful, Mr. Rowan. I've been careful my entire life, Caleb replied. That's how I survived. Victor slid documents across the table. We've uncovered correspondence indicating coercion, intimidation, and intentional misinformation provided to a minor beneficiary. Ashcroft glanced at the papers, then looked up sharply. You're accusing us of criminal behavior. No, Victor said. We're proving it. Silence stretched tight. One of the other men shifted in his seat. What do you want? He asked finally. Caleb folded his hands. Transparency, public acknowledgement, and full restitution. Ashcroft laughed once. Cold. You think you can just walk in and demand that? Caleb met his gaze without blinking. I think you're afraid of what happens if this goes to court. Isadora leaned forward now. Because it won't just be his father's name that surfaces, she said smoothly. It will be yours, and everyone else who signed off on making a boy believe he had nothing. Ashcroft's jaw tightened. You're backing him? Ashcroft asked. Isadora smiled faintly. I'm correcting a miscalculation. The balance of the room shifted. Ashcroft exhaled slowly. This could take years. Caleb shook his head. No, it won't. Victor placed one final document on the table. This is a formal request for mediation. Refuse it, and we file criminal discovery within 48 hours. Ashcroft stared at the page. Then he closed his folder. We'll review, he said tightly. As the men stood to leave, Ashcroft paused beside Caleb. You could have stayed quiet, he said. Lived comfortably. Caleb looked up at him. So could my father. After they left, the room felt lighter. Not victorious. Honest. Isadora stood. You did well. I didn't do it alone, Caleb said. She nodded. No, but you led it. Caleb gathered his things. This isn't over. No, Isadora agreed. But the ending is closer now. That evening, Caleb picked Mia up from school himself. She ran to him arms wide, unburdened by the day's weight. Did you fix the big problem? She asked. Caleb smiled. I started fixing it. She took his hand. That's okay. You always finish. As they walked home, Caleb felt something unfamiliar but welcome. Not relief. Momentum. Whatever the next part held, he would face it standing. Not as a man who checked his balance in silence, but as someone who finally understood what had been taken, and what he was ready to reclaim. The city didn't pause while negotiations unfolded behind closed doors. Traffic kept moving. Stores opened and closed. Children went to school and came home with backpacks full of ordinary worries. Caleb learned quickly that justice rarely arrived with fireworks. It came in emails marked confidential, in late-night calls Victor took with the door closed, in long stretches of waiting where nothing seemed to happen at all. And then, one morning, it did. Victor called just after sunrise. They accepted mediation, he said. All parties. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, Mia across from him coloring a sun with too many rays. He covered the phone. That's good, right? Victor let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. It's very good. The mediation took place 3 weeks later in a neutral building far from glass towers and corner offices. No audience. No spectacle. Just documents, timelines, and the quiet dismantling of a story that had been built on lies. Caleb didn't speak much. He didn't need to. The evidence did it for him. Emails that contradicted sworn statements, signatures that proved intent, records that showed how a disappearance had been convenient for too many people. His uncle's name surfaced again and again, woven through decisions that had shaped Caleb's entire childhood. When it was over, the room felt hollowed out. Restitution was agreed upon. Public acknowledgement drafted carefully, painfully. A formal admission of wrongdoing, Not loud, not satisfying in the way movies promised, but real. Permanent. Isadora stood beside Caleb as the final papers were signed. She didn't look pleased. She looked thoughtful. "Your father would have hated this part," she said quietly. "The paperwork." Caleb nodded. "He would have liked the outcome." She glanced at him. "You could step into all of this now. Boards, strategy, influence." Caleb shook his head. "Not yet. Maybe never," she said. "Maybe," he agreed. That afternoon, Caleb went somewhere he hadn't been in years. The old warehouse by the river. It was scheduled for redevelopment. Glass condos, retail space, but for now it stood quiet, rusted and stubborn, much like the man who had once helped design its routes. Caleb walked along the fence, reading faded numbers, imagining his father here, hands on hips, planning for a future he never got to see. "I'm still figuring it out," Caleb said aloud. "But I see you now." The wind moved through the broken grass. Felt enough. Life didn't transform overnight. Caleb didn't quit his job immediately. He didn't buy a bigger apartment or trade his car. He set up trusts instead, boring, careful, protective. For Mia. For time. For peace. He enrolled Mia in a science program she'd been begging for. Watched her confidence bloom. Listened to her explain experiments with a seriousness that made him smile. He volunteered at the school on Fridays, quietly, anonymously. At the bank, Elena Park was promoted. She sent Caleb a thank you note he kept in a drawer, not as proof of success, but as a reminder of how easily moments could turn if someone paid attention. Isadora called occasionally, not to advise, to check in. "You're quiet," she said once. "I like it," Caleb replied. She laughed softly. That might be the richest choice of all. One evening, as Caleb tucked Mia into bed, she looked at him with the same sharp curiosity that had always undone him. "Daddy," she said, "are we rich now?" Caleb smiled. "We're okay." She considered this. Like, really okay? He brushed hair from her forehead. Like safe and honest. She nodded, satisfied. "That's better." Later, Caleb sat alone on the couch, the apartment lit by the city's gentle glow. He thought about the day he'd stood in the bank, asking to see a number he was afraid to face. How laughter had tried to make him small. He understood now that power wasn't the balance itself. It was knowing who you were without it, and choosing what to do once you had it. The public acknowledgement ran a week later, buried in the business section. Easy to miss. Caleb read it once, then closed the page. He didn't need it framed. The past no longer owned him. On a Saturday morning, Caleb and Mia walked past the bank together. She skipped, counting tiles. He didn't look inside. He didn't need to. "What are we doing today?" she asked. "Whatever we want," he said. She grinned. "Can we get pancakes?" "Absolutely." As they walked on, Caleb felt the quiet certainty settle in, the kind that didn't demand attention or applause. He had asked to see his balance. What he found instead was truth. And this time it stayed.